So, Greg Tanaka, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I think we'd like to begin as a planning commissioner who's been serving the community now for, what, almost 6 years? It's been about
No, actually, I'm on my 7th year, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
you probably have spanned the greatest degree of change in terms of community attitudes towards development, and certainly in the Planning Commission, you have seen that in the membership of the commission and in the general outlook of the commission. And you chaired the commission last year during a period of tremendous change as the council appointed the then latest group of members. So I'm wondering if you could tell us how your own personal views have evolved about development in Palo Alto over that time period, and in particular, where you currently stand on the limiting of commercial development in the community.
Yeah, well, so for me, I don't quite come from it as a like either or, right? Like zero development or let's build Manhattan. I come from it really from the community. So, you know, from my history, I started out as president of the College Terrace Residents Association. So I did that for many years. And you know, I don't know if you followed what I did. I know some of you may, well, I'm not sure all you guys did. But so in College Terrace, when I first got there, you know, they were trying to get this residential permanent parking program. This was the very first in Palo Alto history. And I think they were trying to get it going for like 5 or 6 years before I actually even got there. And the reason why is because half the neighborhood wanted it and half the neighborhood didn't want it. Some people wanted it because some of the businesses were parking in the neighborhood from El Camino side, Stanford, right, and then Facebook. So you had all this pressure on the neighborhood. And you know, the people that didn't want it because who wants to pay for parking in front of their house, right? People kind of feel like you should be able to park in front of your house. So it was a really contentious issue, and it was kind of like my first taste of Palo Alto, right? in terms of this incredible amount of advocacy in terms of people being so involved, right? And if you were to attend some of those neighborhood meetings about the RPP, people were ready to throw chairs at each other. I mean, it was contentious. There were a lot of contentious meetings. And the thing that I learned from this is that, especially here in Palo Alto, because you have such an engaged community, it's really important to hear what people are saying. And I think that's kind of my driving factor. It's not so much one thing's good and another thing's bad. It's not so much that. It's more like kind of listening to the different viewpoints. And I think that's actually very important because every viewpoint has a good point, actually. Every viewpoint adds something to the solution. And I think that on the RPP, we were actually able to get it through. So I'm not sure if, you probably followed it. I'm not sure if you guys were there at the time, but I mean, we got, what, 90% or more of the neighborhood to buy into it. We got it through the Planning Commission. We got it through the City Council. And today, I mean, what have you guys heard about the College Terrace RPP? Well, I mean, some of the things that I've heard was that it's held up as one of the models for what the RPP was done right in general. And so I think that's, I mean, that's what you want, right? You want something that you can look back on and say it's a success, right? It's a success because rather than just ramming it down people's throats, right? People bought into it. And it's something that today is highly sought after in a lot of other neighborhoods.
So I want to steer you back to the question, which had to do with the evolution of your thinking as you've gone through this transition on the Planning Commission and as attitudes towards growth have changed in Palo Alto.
Yeah. So for me, like I was saying, I'm first of all, you know, as a neighborhood leader or on a Planning Commission, it's my job to hear the voice of the community. So, so for every project, I always try to do that. Right? I try to think about whether it's the RPP or traffic calming or where other development might be going on, is to really listen to what are people's viewpoints, what are people's concerns, what are the things that we could help mitigate some of the concerns, And so what I try to do is I try to bring people together and really have real, true dialogue, because I think a lot of times many people come in with very dogmatic, ideological points of view, right? Saying zero development, I want nothing, zero, zip, right? Or there's some other people who say, well, I want, this Manhattan, right? And the truth is that neither one's really quite right. And the problem if you're super ideological is that it's hard to bridge those gaps. It's hard to get things done. So this residential permanent parking program that was 5 years or more in the making, or 6 years and more in the making, finally happened because true dialogue happened. And if you want to make things happen, people gotta buy into it, because it's not, you can't mandate something. It's really hard to mandate something. You really need people to buy in. You want people to buy in because you get better results. And
so have you found your point of view, your personal point of view, change over the last few years as a result of this process you're describing of listening to everybody and trying to find the middle ground?
So I guess I would describe it as not so much trying to find the middle ground. The thing I always strive for is try to find a win-win solution. I think the problem with an ideological point of view is that it kind of means that somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And I don't think that's the best government, right, or the best way of having a community, because someone else feels bad. I think the best thing to do is to actually to get people to buy into it.
Right, I understand the point you're making. You're making it very clear. What I'm trying to do is to press you to explain how you have taken that viewpoint and actually put it into operation in your role as a planning commission.
I can give you an example. So there was a project, Palo Alto Commons. I'm not sure if you guys remember this. It's a pretty old project now. It was a community center on El Camino Way, so just a few blocks down, and they wanted to extend the wing. So it was a 3-story building going against a two-story townhouse. And the people in the 2-story townhouse, as you can imagine, were kind of up in arms. It was something that they were very, very concerned about this development, because it's going right against their backyards. And the developer wanted to meet. I said, okay, well, we can meet, but if you want to meet, I want the other side to be there as well, right? Because what's really important is, and this is one of the challenges in kind of the format of the Planning Commission or the City Council, is that you have these Robert rules where you have your 2 minutes or 5 minutes to speak, but I mean, people talk at each other, but you can't have true dialogue in these meetings. So when any time a developer asks to meet with me, I'm saying, sure, but I want the other side there. I want the people who are really upset about this there as well. So I had the developer there. I invited then Chair Martinez. I'm not sure, well, you guys know Chair Martinez. There as well, and we met with the developer along with several of the neighbors who were very, very, very concerned about this project. And very much like the residential permanent parking program, you saw sparks fly. Eduardo Martinez told me, God, I can't believe you invited me to this meeting. It was such a contentious, uncomfortable meeting. But the thing I found out, like even in College Terrace, whether it was a traffic calming or permanent parking program, is that people need to vent. People need to kind of actually have a dialogue, and people need to actually be able to express their viewpoint, and you need to actually be able to listen to it. Because what happened was, it was about a 3-hour meeting. It was a really, really long meeting, and even though people were very upset, the thing is that people felt like they were heard. The developer realized that, first of all, the people in townhomes actually had a good point. They're looking, some of the windows would be looking into people's living rooms and bathrooms, right? Very, very concerning. The folks in the townhomes realized that, first of all, this is a senior center. It's actually helping with the senior housing. They actually had the legal right to do what they were doing. And what it did is brought people closer together. It didn't necessarily solve all problems, but by the time it hit Planning Commission, it was a non-story. So unfortunately, it wasn't something exciting to write about. There weren't sparks, there weren't sparks that happened at the Planning Commission meeting. And the reason why is because a lot of the pressure was a lot of the system. A lot of it was diffused. And we came up with a kind of a win-win solution that, so I think if you look back at the transcripts from Chair Martinez, I mean, he said that, Greg, this was one of the best things we've ever done at the Planning Commission, was actually having this kind of dialogue. So that's the approach I take, actually, is looking at something with the project and getting all sides involved. Because a lot of times that doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, you have some disastrous results. So that's how I approach it, right? I really approach it as a problem solver. I don't approach it as a, it's got to be this or that, because I just don't, in fact, I see other people try to do that. We have like, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. And when you do that, you can't bring people together, you can't move forward, you can't get things done. And so it's really important in my experience, and I've been through a lot of contentious stuff. I mean, it's very important to get buy-in. And the way you get buy-in is you have to have an open mind. You can't come in saying all development's good or all development's bad. That just, it's not productive. And
so what went wrong with the Maybell project? You voted against that at the Planning Commission level?
Well, I think Gennady was actually there and reported on it, so.
I'm sure he was.
Yeah,
so I'm sure you have some strong feelings about where that went off the rails. Can you describe what happened there in your mind?
Yeah, so yeah, basically, one of the first questions I ask when staff brings us a project is, what kind of community outreach have you done? That's the first question I ask. I always ask that because, to me, that's homework. That you got to do your homework. If you don't do your homework, you shouldn't even come to a planning commission meeting. And I asked staff, and they said, yeah, we held a couple meetings, and great community support. And I'm like, wait a second, this is like a 3-story building where there used to be an orchard surrounded by a bunch of R1 neighborhood. If I maybe hadn't done the stuff I did in College Terrace, and as you guys know, in College Terrace, people are very, very active. I might have thought, okay, yeah, you guys do your homework, we're good, we're ready to roll, everything's good. But, I mean, John, you were at that meeting. There was no one there, right? There was, to me, I think the outreach wasn't sufficient, right? I've been part of projects that were much less controversial, and a lot more people showed up, a lot more comments came in, and it didn't pass the smell test. Staff, I mean, I know staff tried hard, and they always feel under-resourced, but they didn't do what I did on Palo Alto Commons, right? They didn't actually. I think probably the challenge was, I think staff felt that they already had some of the backing of City Council. They did the routine, present the project to neighborhoods. But what didn't happen is, like I talked about the RPP program or the Palo Alto Commons project, where people had true debate, true dialogue. And unless that happens, people are going to be very upset. I mean, and I think, Johnny, you quoted me in the paper saying something, and I forgot the exact quote that you took, but it was like something to the effect that if we don't do proper outreach, and I can't remember the exact quote that you quoted me for, but if we don't do proper outreach, there's going to be a lot of people are going to be up in arms, and unfortunately, I think that's what happened. So. And so that's why I think it's important to get this kind of community buy-in. In fact, one of the things that I would like to do if I was on City Council is actually kind of mandate that. I really think that, and when I ask staff to do this, right, they're very reluctant. And the reason why they're reluctant is because it's very uncomfortable. I mean, you don't know what it's like. Well, maybe you guys do know what it's like, but it's like you sit in a room and people are yelling at you and yelling at each other, and it's very uncomfortable. Staff does not like that. They do not like being in these kind of meetings. And even on the most recent Mayfield project, I asked staff, hey, let's get all the sites together. Let's have a true dialogue on what's going on. This is the second version of the Mayfield project. And the staff is like, we don't have enough staff time. Then we're very, very reluctant. And I understand it's a very uncomfortable situation, but if you want to get buy-in, if you want to find win-win solutions, this is necessary. I mean, you have to get uncomfortable. You have to get people involved and buy into it. It's kind of like I'm not sure you guys heard of the Ikea Effect? No? Okay. So the Ikea Effect is this.
Let's take a quick break here, because the sun is halfway on your face there, and I want to adjust the camera. And if you could just scoot over a couple inches. Just
sure, no problem.
Okay, that's great. And
fighting the sun.
Yeah. Okay. And in order to get through all the questions that we have, I'd like to urge you to respond with a little more brevity.
Okay,
if you
sure.
can.
Sure,
I know it's
sure.
hard because we're sort of in a discussion.
Oh, no problem, no problem. But let me just finish the point I was making. It's called the Ikea Effect, right? You can even Google it. And basically what it is like, so if I go buy like a shelf at Ikea and I put it together myself, no matter how ugly that is, because I was involved in building it, I love it, right? It's like, although I may never actually buy it myself, but because I was so involved, my blood, sweat, and tears are in this thing. And that's kind of what you want, actually, on projects, right? I mean, sometimes you can get to the same result, but if you have buy-in, and people are involved, and they felt like they were involved, the same project could happen, and everyone feels like they were heard, if they felt like this is actually a good project. So it's kind of like the Ikea effect, right? I think that's something that I strive for, right? And so I think this kind of balanced approach, right, of really listening, being thoughtful, getting people involved, trying to create this IKEA effect for these different projects or initiatives, I think is the right thing to do, because I think, you know, the thing that I'm really good at is actually bringing people together, because I really do, I truly go into these discussions with an open mind, not with my mind made up. A lot of people have their mind made up saying, this is wrong, this is good. And rarely in life is things binary. Is it black and white? I mean, there's always different shades of gray. And I think find those shades of gray and getting people to buy in is the right thing to do. And I think that's what our community needs.
So Greg, I think that we appreciate your approach that's inclusive, focused on problem solving, hearing everyone, their concerns, kind of brainstorming together solutions there. And I think that given that you've had 7 years on the Planning Commission now and the previous years as a neighborhood leader.
That's also in Infrastructure Blue Ribbon Commission as well.
And the Blue Ribbon Commission. You must have some expertise and some perspective now on what you think will probably work and bring about a better Palo Alto. That's not to say that you're pushing ideas down anyone's throat, but you, I would think, would have some perspective on different issues that are facing the community now. So very specifically, I'm wondering if you could talk about the office cap, the annual office cap. When it came in front of the commission, you called it a blunt tool, but I'm wondering if you think it was actually the correct tool for the city to use, and what is your perspective now on whether or not that cap should continue, there should be a moratorium, whether the cap could expand?
Yeah. So I think that we made comments on, so our job on the Planning Commission was to make comments on and recommendations on the office cap, which we did. In general, my feeling is that it's kind of like what I was saying earlier, is that not all office projects are bad, and not all office projects are good, right? And that's kind of the reality. I know some people feel that all office projects are bad, and some people feel that all office projects are good, but it's simply not true, right? There are never yes and no type of things, right? It's usually there's some good ones and there's some bad ones, and I think that's why I call it kind of a blunt tool, because it's trying to say all office over 50,000 feet or more than cumulative 50,000 feet is bad. And I think that if I talk to the three of you here and ask you, is that really true? I mean, in fact, I could probably talk to almost anyone here in Palo Alto. Is that really true? Is all office bad? If 50,000 in 1 foot, is that bad? I think most people would admit that no, it's not, right? So that's why I call it a blunt instrument. It's trying to address some of the concerns that a lot of the residents had because they didn't feel included in the discussion. But is it the right? Is it the best solution? I don't know about that. I think there's probably other ways of doing it.
Was it a positive step in the right direction then?
Well, I think what it did do is that it made people feel heard, right? I think there's a lot of angst over some of the development, and so it's addressing some of that. But it's kind of really, you have to look at what is the cause and the effect, right? Is it the cause or is it really the effect? And I think the office cap, it's kind of like if I got a splinter in my finger, and I just put a Band-Aid on it versus trying to remove the splinter from my finger, right? it would still kind of sit there and fester, right? And really kind of what's important is if people feel involved and bought in, they may accept an office or enough office development over 50,000 feet, right? If they feel bought into it. But if they don't feel bought into it, even 10,000 square feet is too much, right? Any amount of square feet is too much, right? And that's what I'm saying is that you got to look, and I think this is something that have kind of a deeper understanding on now, is that you have to look at, are you solving the root cause of the problem, or is it just a Band-Aid, right? Is it a temporary solution, right? And I think what's really important is to have dialogue, and more importantly, and this is something I didn't get a chance to talk about earlier, is also a feedback mechanism. So the one challenge with developments in general is that they have, like JJNF, right? I mean, it's just now being built. We were talking about this when I was president of my neighborhood association. Just think about how many years ago that was, right? And the big problem with development is that the people on the council are different, the people in the residents association are different, the people on the planning commissions are different, right? I mean, that may not open until the new council is seated, right? And so you have this incredibly long time horizons. And one of the challenges is that you don't have the memory, right? It's not like, okay, I get instant feedback as to what the results are, right? It takes a long time. And so I think the other thing that's needed besides true dialogue is a feedback mechanism. You need a feedback mechanisms because there's been a lot of angst over previous planned communities where PCs where essentially, Cafe Riache over there on Sheridan, one of the big common complaints is, oh, hey, there's this plaza that's supposed to be for public space, and yet, a lot of times it's used for their tables, right? For eating area. It's kind of like for private use, right? Not really for public use. And you could go around the city of all these kind of issues where the PCs were supposed to, these public benefits were supposed to happen, and yet, where are they, right? Where's the enforcement of them? And so and when that doesn't happen, you get a lot of people very angry. Like, wait a second, so about a week or so ago, I spoke at the Edgewood Plaza area where there was supposed to be a grocery store, and people are like, it's been a year and a half, no grocery store, all the homes are sold, what's going on? The developer doesn't seem to be doing anything. And so when people don't feel like they're heard, when people feel like that public benefit didn't happen, I think that's when you get this kind of thing like, let's stop everything, right? And I totally understand that perspective.
Yeah, but I think that you were talking about the angst and the concern, but I think that can actually be broken down if you look at all these different situations into certain specific issues, like a lack of enforcement.
Yeah.
Or people don't want new development because traffic's already a nightmare. Mm-hmm. So getting beyond the understanding that people do have concerns, how do you address those concerns, not just the fact that they have concerns, but how do you address traffic? How do you address this lack of enforcement, for example? So when we're talking about development, are you in favor of just halting development altogether at this point so that we can address some of those concerns, or what is your perspective on that?
I think the first thing is when a project is initiated, I truly believe that we need, as a city, we need to do a better job in having dialogue about the project. And more than just us presenting the project, and because when people just present the project, what happens, and the feedback I get from folks is that they feel like the city is just advocating it, or the developer is just advocating it. There's no real chance for folks to be able to give their, to have the Ikea effect, as I spoke about earlier, right? So I think when project, whether it's an office project or whatever the project might be, or whether it's a new bike route, or pick your favorite topic, right? I think the involvement is very important, so you have this two-way dialogue.
So Greg, you've repeatedly said that. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get you to answer questions that are specific and commit yourself.
Sure, tell me which project you want to talk about.
So are you in favor or opposed to continuation of a development cap in the neighborhood of 50,000 square feet? Yes or no?
You mean for office, or you mean in general?
No, the current commercial development restriction.
Yeah, so...
it's a yes/no question.
Yeah, but I'm not, the world's not a yes, no. And that's the situation, that's actually the crux of the issue, is that I think...
I understand that, but give me a yes, no, and then explain what your position, clarify the nuance.
Yeah, so I think you saw in the Planning Commission we recommended it, right, to council.
Right.
And so, I mean, you know how I voted, so there's no mystery, no secret there, right?
I think you were absent on the night that was voted on, but...
It was a 2-2 vote, and
okay.
there was no clear consensus.
Okay, well...
So
anyway,
you're for it?
well, you know, I think that I think it's trying to solve a problem. I don't know if it's whether it's solving the root cause of the problem.
Well, feel free to offer an alternative. I just want to...
Okay, I'll offer an
I just want to know whether you
yeah.
are for it or...
So I'll give you an alternative, right? I think that the example I gave about Palo Alto Commons should be the process.
No, I understand what the process should be, but ultimately, as a city council member, you have to vote one way or the other. Everything isn't going to come to you nice and cleaned up by this process. You're going to have to take votes.
Sure.
So what we're trying to get from you is indication of how you would vote when it comes to time to do that.
Yeah.
You can't just keep sending things back for further negotiation in the community. So are you supportive of the concept of a development cap, number one?
Yeah, so I think if you guys look through my other surveys, and I've done, I don't know, a bunch of them, you'll see that I did support that. So
the answer is yes. And do you...
But I guess my only part is that I just think it's like putting a Band-Aid on a splinter.
No, you've made that clear. I didn't expect this to be a difficult question because you've answered surveys that not only have said you support the cap, but you've even said you support a moratorium, which is why
I know, but I didn't get a chance to kind of explain. I mean, so the thing is that the problem is deeper than a moratorium, right? The moratorium is a Band-Aid to a bigger problem, right? And that's what I'm trying to convey. And so
is the concept of a metered degree of development, which is what the development cap is intending to be for a short period of time, is the concept of having a metered degree of development in this community something that you would support? Or would you support a reliance on the underlying zoning, which is what we've done in past years, coming out of the review of the comprehensive plan? It's two different kind of philosophies about how we proceed. Which do you lean toward?
So I guess maybe explain the alternative. So you're saying, what do you mean by metered?
That's essentially what the development cap is. It's the council has decided for at least until the completion of the comprehensive plan, we're going to limit on a kind of beauty contest basis 50,000 square feet of commercial development in El Camino and downtown Palo Alto. You know all this. The question is what happens when the comprehensive plan is completed, assuming it is completed. An alternative would be to rely on the zoning, which is historically what communities do, right? So philosophically, which direction are you inclined toward?
Yeah, so I think the basic idea of the comp plan, or the comprehensive plan, is that it's kind of like the land use Bible. It kind of talks about the visions and what we're trying to accomplish as a community. And the zoning code is written based off of that. Right? So, so like things like PCs or like moratoriums are kind of like a Band-Aid until we have the comp plan done. So the comp plan actually expired. I'm sure all you guys know that. It's 6 years. It's almost like drinking spilled milk, right?
I understand that. I want to cut short the history here. It's a simple question. Do you believe that development in Palo Alto should be guided by the zoning, and basically any developments that adhere to the zoning would be approved? Or do you believe that there should be some form of limitation over time, a metered approach to the amount of commercial development that is allowed in the community?
Yeah, I think that the comp plan should be something that the community buys into, and then the community buys into it, the zoning code is written off it, and that's what we should follow.
That's not the question, though.
Oh, what are you asking?
I'm asking, do you philosophically believe that growth in Palo Alto should be controlled through some sort of a metered approach, with a cap on the square footage, whatever that cap might be, or do you believe that the underlying zoning should be the tool by which we control growth?
I believe, if you ask me what I believe in, is that we should have a comp plan the community buys into and a zoning code that's based off of the comprehensive plan.
But what do you favor?
That's what I favor, I just told you.
So you have no view of your own?
No, I just told you my view.
That's a process view. That's not a substantive view.
Well, I guess...
if I asked you, should someone be able to build a 50-foot house in College Terrace, you wouldn't, the answer to that wouldn't be, well, we'd need a process through which we had discussed it and whatever people decided, that's what we ought to do. Presumably, you would have a point of view on that. And that's what voters are entitled to know.
Okay, I mean,
what is your point of view on these issues?
Let's talk about specifics, right? So, so let's say...
I've asked you a specific question.
Yeah, so let's talk about specifics. So let's say someone wanted to build a 50-foot height
Let's
R1.
just stick with the question that I've asked.
Okay, sure.
Which approach would you take as a member of the council with regards to how growth is managed and controlled in Palo Alto?
Until the comprehensive plan is done, the meter approach seems like the logical approach. So I guess
And then?
When a comprehensive plan is passed, finally enacted, and the zoning codes are written off of that, that should be the plan. It should be based off the comp plan.
Okay, so you would favor the termination of a metered growth limitation approach, which is what the cap does.
Assuming we're not using a old comp plan, yeah.
Okay.
Right. I mean, if we keep using a comp plan that's expired 6 years ago.
No, I'm talking about the new.
Yeah,
comp plan.
because the comp plan, you got to understand, the current comp plan we're under was made last century, right? So it's pretty old, and
Right.
I don't know if it really includes the latest values that people have here in Palo Alto.
But it didn't include any caps on development.
Well, that's true, but I'm saying though is what's important is the comp plan's supposed to be for 10 years, right? It's way past that time now, and so what we want is we want an updated comp plan. I mean, it's like the analogy I was trying to bring up earlier. It's like, I mean, would you guys drink spilled milk? No. I mean, the comp plan is like way expired.
Okay,
right?
we need to move on to other topics here.
Okay.
Jocelyn?
One of the concerns about high-density housing is that the public transit that presumably people would take is not really robust. In fact, it's pretty anemic right now. Palo Alto Shuttle doesn't really go to many places that people want, or with the frequency. So do you favor moving forward with high-density housing at this point, given the sort of shaky public transit infrastructure, or do you favor holding off on high-density housing?
I think for any development, what you need is to make sure that you have the infrastructure around there to support it. And if there's not the infrastructure around to support it, you shouldn't do it, right? It doesn't make sense. So if you're saying high-density housing in the middle of an R1 neighborhood where there's not good connectivity, good transit, probably doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're talking about like high-density housing near like a Caltrain stop, like University Avenue, probably makes more sense. But you have to really look at the specifics because that's the problem with broad brush strokes, is that not everything's good and not everything's bad. The world's much more nuanced, and I think it's kind of a cop-out when people make these broad brush strokes, because the problem with it is that there's missed opportunity, right? And so if we could talk about more
through dialogue.
Yeah, we could have a much more. I mean, if we could talk about specifics, we could, a specific project, we could really kind of look at that closely and understand. But in general, it depends on the context, where it is, the infrastructure around there, what kind of community buy-in you have. So that's what's important.
Do you think there's enough public transit access at Page Mill and El Camino right now to warrant the micro-unit proposed housing?
Well, so it's not that close to the Caltrain station. I mean, it's close, but it's not that close. In general, the problem with having so in general, commercial thrives on traffic, right? So it's actually one of the busiest corners. It's like probably the busiest corner of Palo Alto. So retail thrives there. So I think having like when you have commercial, or especially retail against traffic, it's like a great thing. When you put residential against traffic, you don't get that same effect. So it's having residential kind of near transit, but not necessarily on the busiest corner in Palo Alto, is probably makes more sense. Having retail at high traffic areas does wonders for these coffers, providing services for the residents here in Palo Alto. So I think that's kind of the thinking that has to go on, is like, okay, and that's the thing about these projects, is it depends on the context, right, of where it is. So if the project is there and it's really in the right context, great, right? But I personally believe that if you have a high traffic area, retail is really good for that.
Retail's better.
Yeah, in general.
We just have a couple of minutes left, so maybe just some real quick answers. Do you support increasing the fines that are being levied currently against the developer of the Edgewood Plaza for the failure to have a grocery store open there?
Yeah, so actually I spoke about that at Edgewood Plaza, and I did say yes. I thought that.
Do you have a sense of how much that should be, or would you just keep ramping it up until something happens?
Well, okay, so I'm actually in the retail area. I know a bit about retail. And so definitely got the pressure, the financial pressure, that makes sense. But the other thing is you have to look at the underlying business. So there's been a market that was there and it shut down. And you have to make sure that the business dynamics are there that can support a grocery store. And I've talked to a lot of the residents in those areas, and they're very upset. They really want a grocery store. I mean, I feel their pain, because in College Terrace we had JJ&F, and similar story. And so I think that not just you have to put the pressure, but you also need the pull effect too. You want to make sure that a grocery store that can go there can be successful, right? And so you need the right kind of setup so that it can thrive.
Right, but that's not the city's issue. The city's issue is what to do to compel what it originally.
Well, that's the push, right? So certainly you do the push mechanism,
right.
But a lot of cities actually, they have the economic development director, right, who will actually try to do a lot of outreach to try to find the right kind of businesses to fill these kind of spaces and try to curate what goes on.
Right.
And so, as you know, we don't actually have one right now. So, I mean, that's something which I think we do need to need to have. And so I think that is actually, I believe, something that the city needs to do as well, is be very proactive in trying to find someone, try to make sure that they have the right business set up, so that we could not just after someone opens a grocery store, but that it could thrive, right? And it could serve the community, right? And it could be a financially viable business as well, because you could try to compel, but if it's not financially viable and it shuts down again, it may just be vacant, right? People might just pay the fine. So I think that's important. I think the other thing, and I talked a little bit about this even on the commission, is this idea of like retail BMR. So retail is not the highest margin business, especially grocery stores. Grocery stores are really, not the highest margin. And so with retail BMR, basically you can allow this kind of retail to thrive in these kind of areas that you want to kind of serve the community. There's a street in London. Name skips my mind right now.
I don't.
Okay.
I want to interrupt just because we want to get to some more questions.
Sure.
So what is your view on regulating Airbnb, if you believe it needs regulating, and what should the city's approach be to that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think Airbnb. So I've been knocking a lot of doors. So I was knocking one door on Middlefield, and this lady, she's probably in her 80s or 90s, probably more in her 90s. She rented her house, a lot of the rooms, to a bunch of Stanford students. And it was actually quite amazing, because not only did she get extra income, but they helped take out the trash, they helped maintain the house. I mean, it was just like totally a win-win solution, and I love those kind of things. So Airbnb can help facilitate some of that, but there's also drawbacks. I've also heard people where they're like, continuous churn of people, there's no sense of community. When my wife and I first moved to College Terrace, the first thing that happened in the first week we were there, our neighbors came over to welcome us. I've lived in Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Berkeley, Pasadena, a bunch of cities. Never happened, right? And so the sense of community is actually what makes Palo Alto very special. And when you have these Airbnbs and continuous churn of people, you don't know who your neighbor is, right? You don't have the sense of community. So
what would you do if you're on the council?
Well, I mean, here's the other issue is that there's a bit of unfairness because the Airbnb, well, theoretically people are supposed to pay tax on it. It's really hard to actually collect it. So I think there's kind of unfairness with the hotels. So we don't get our revenue stream from it. So that's one of the things that we need to solve. I think the other part of it is if somebody's living there, like the homeowner lives there, it's very different. Because Airbnb, actually, when it first started, it was like not just a place to stay, but it was like you have a host who actually show you the city. And if you read about the story of Airbnb when it first started out.
So what would you do if you were on?
Oh no, so I was saying. So one of the things I was talking about, one was the actually collecting the tax that we should be getting. I think the other part of it is
the transient occupancy tax.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you go about doing that?
Well, so the great thing here is Airbnb is just up the road. They're in SF. They're not that far away. So I think maybe having them collect it, right? So I think we have to look at mechanisms. How do we actually get that? I think the second thing is and by the way, the TOT transit occupancy tax is like in the top 3 revenue sources for the city, right? Of 12 revenue sources. So I think the other part of it is I mean, and you hear horror stories about this, where Airbnbs go wild, right? Where there's just like trash. You have like, So I think there has to be a solution also around if it's like an absentee Airbnb. I think those need to be more regulated than if someone's like, someone's using that for supplemental income, right? Someone's like, retired and they're renting out the spare rooms that their kids have moved out. I think that's a different situation. So I think we need to separate the Airbnb into 2 parts. There's the ones where people aren't living there. It's just kind of like a business, so to speak, right? And there's ones where people actually live there and maybe they're retired and they're using it for extra income. So those 2 have to be separated. I think the ones that if the owner doesn't live there, I think those need to be regulated more than the ones that aren't.
Okay. You want to ask one more?
Sure. Buena Vista Mobile Home Park. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the city and public funds should be used to preserve it as it is, or would you favor a different type of affordable housing to be built there, maybe with more units? Yeah.
So this is an example of something which I would say that and I know that you don't like the idea of them. I'm trying to find these win-win solutions, but.
Oh, I love win-win.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm saying though is
position.
So I guess I guess this is like the process. So I think Buena Vista has potential unless we actually do the kind of outreach that I talked about doing. It has the potential of being something that's very, very controversial. So I've actually knocked on a lot of doors around that area, and there's a lot of wide-ranging set of opinions about that project, and some very, very deeply held. And that's an example where if you try to say this is the right way or this is the right way, you're going to get a very divisive neighborhood. And I know, like, from the reporter point of view, you want these like quick, snappy answers, like, oh yeah, he's all for this or all against this, right? But the world's not like that. And I can tell you for Buena Vista, because I've talked to so many people in that area, and if we go headlong into this project saying like, we absolutely want to have it and we're going to support it 100%, doesn't matter what other people say, that's going to be a problem. Or vice versa, we say, we're definitely not going to do it. If we're incredibly polarized on it, we're going to have, if you think Maybell was an issue, we're going to see another issue. So I think that's something which I feel fairly certain about that one, where if we don't get the buy-in, if we don't get the community really involved on this kind of decision, there will be issues. There will be significant issues that will come about because of that. So that's what I could truly say, and I say with great certainty, because I've been through a lot of these other projects. And so Buena Vista is one where you get not just the folks that live there, but the people that live around there. This is one we need to have a true dialogue on, because If we do not, if you thought we had sparks on Maybell, you haven't seen anything yet.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to end it there. Greg Tanaka, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah.